It should have audio. Maybe it just can't hear me because it's way up there. Well, let's continue. If something happens, then we'll do our best. Okay. With the cutting boards, there's right and wrong cutting boards. The wrong kind of cutting boards are going to kill your knife edge. Glass, ceramic, hard plastics, really hard woods are going to look nice. They're going to clean really easily, but they're harder than the knife. So every time you slice on those cutting surfaces, they destroy your knife edge. So the wooden cutting boards that are softer, that allow you to cut into them a little bit, the softer cutting boards scratch easily, so there is a disadvantage. The good thing about the ones that we use, A, we have a forever guarantee on them, so we can replace them. But this material that we use is called polypropylene, and it's a plastic that is self-healing, is what they refer to it. When you put this in the dishwasher, the heat hits it, and the scratches kind of plane themselves back out. Now, when you're slicing into the cutting board, it's not making huge slices. Okay, you guys can't see unless it's really close. That's another nice thing about having a sharp knife, and a Cutco knife specifically, is you're not pushing, you're not forcing the knife through the food. Because the knife is sharp, it cuts nice and clean and simply. Okay, especially when you're doing the chopping. Again, there's not going to be any scratches coming on the cutting board if you're doing it right. So the polypropylene material is really nice, again, because it's self-healing, it's sanitary. Unlike the wood, where they're really high maintenance, you have to scrape them and salt them and blah, 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 all that stuff. So super high maintenance. They're pretty, super high maintenance. These, not as pretty, but like I said, that forever guarantee makes a huge difference, and that self-healing keeps them nice and smooth. So the cutting board is really, really, really key. We're going to go through two different styles of knives. We have the Santoku style, which is Japanese style. Santoku means chop, dice, and slice. So that's what it's designed. It's a little more versatile than the regular standard chef's knife. Now, the chef's knife, one of the things that is important when it comes to how these two different knives work is how they chop. The radius is where the knife rocks, and in this case the radius is right up at the top. So you just chop and dice with it. You can hold your hand up here. This isn't a knife, most of the chopping knives you're not going to do a lot of slicing with. There are a couple different techniques we're going to go through. One is called the high technique, where you are doing some slicing, but you're slicing into the food, you're not slicing through the food on the cutting board. So that would be the high technique whenever you're cutting something. So if I'm cutting the end of this potato off, I can use the high technique, and I'm not really rubbing the food on the knife on the cutting board. There's also the low technique, which is where the knife point stays down, and you want to use the very back of the blade. And this one is where you kind of shorten up your knife. So the radius is where it rocks. Now in the case of the Santoku knife, the radius is in the middle. So this one rocks a little bit differently, as it's rounded instead of flat like this one. So this one's going to rock a little differently on the middle, because the radius is right in the middle. So with this one, you can chop, same thing, it's just going to feel different when you do it. The other cool thing about the Santoku style, again with this one, you don't want to slice with it because it'll dull the blade. With this one, you can do some more slicing, because when you put this one down on the cutting board, the point catches and allows you to slice without the blade actually rubbing constantly. So this one is really cool. A lot of people use them interchangeably, and that's totally fine. It's all personal preference. It's all, whatever you like, whatever you feel comfortable with. The objective, again, is to help you feel more comfortable by the time you leave here with doing different stuff, not only with these knives, but being able to use them for what they're designed for. So chopping and dicing and breaking the stuff down. So you still want to use most of the back of the blade if you're doing that low technique, but this one, again, gives you a little more versatility. And then there's shorter versions of both, which, again, the size of what you're cutting a lot of times makes a difference with what you're doing. Now, as far as the different kinds of cuts that you do, if you guys are like most people who cook, most people gravitate towards the shorter knives. This is almost everybody's favorite, most used knife when they come in here. And the reason why is because it's an easy knife to use. No matter how big of something they're cutting, they tend to gravitate towards these because you have more control with the shorter knife. The longer the knife, the less control. However, the longer the knife, the more leverage you have. So when it comes to cutting something that's, if I wanted to cut this into potato chips, I have a lot more leverage with the larger knife than I do with the shorter knife. This one is going to be a lot harder to use because I don't have a lot of control over it, or I don't have a lot of leverage on it. So I have to push much harder. I have to use a lot more force, even though the knife is really sharp, or I have to use it like this because the blade doesn't really allow you to chop much. This one with the length, again, gives you a lot more leverage. It's a little bit, again, more to control. It's harder to control, but that all also has a lot to do with comfort and technique. So by the time you leave today, again, my objective is to help you learn how to feel comfortable with all these different knives, so whichever one you want to use, you'll be able to go after, okay? So the more leverage you have with something, the easier it is to cut. So again, we'll teach you guys how to do all this stuff. Okay, let's talk about holding the knife. Why don't you guys grab one, whichever one you want. Everybody has their own little stack here. So whichever one you feel comfortable with. There's two different ways you can hold a knife. Our knives are designed to be held by the handle. Okay, so you can hold the Cutco knives like this. That is just the standard Cutco grip. The other way, they have what's called a pinch grip, and you see a lot of chefs holding onto the blade. So that's another way to hold on to it. It's comfortable one way to you. It's more comfortable another way, perhaps. Whichever is the easiest and most comfortable is what you want to do. The key to how you hold the knife, when you have a good sharp knife and you have the right knife for what you're doing, you don't need to hold on to it super tight. One of the things that we're going to teach you guys is you want to be really relaxed. You want to have a nice relaxed grip, and kind of the motion that you want to do with these knives is like a little bit of a choo-choo train, okay? So see if you can kind of get it going a little bit forward. There you go. And again, you can try with both grips to see which one feels most comfortable to you. Look how you guys all picked up the big knife. That's exciting.
Which one is in this set? This
That's the petite chef. It's the
This
shorter one. Yep.
Yeah.
It's the one that comes with that. Okay. So this is how you this is the basic technique for using the low technique. Okay. So when you're cutting through things, you just kind of use that nice simple motion. Again, you want your hand to be relaxed. You don't need to hold. If I see a bunch of white knuckles, which people hold on to really tight, okay, that's not what you need to be doing. It's just really, really light, really relaxed. Okay. Feel it slicing the cutting board a little bit as it's scratching it?
Yeah.
Okay? And that's okay. Again, that's what it's supposed to do. And otherwise, it would be dulling the knife every time you moved it. All right? So slow or smooth fluid motion. Don't put your finger on top. You lose a lot of control. The only reason people would ever need to do that is because they're trying to get more leverage. If your knife is not sharp, you need to do that. So sharpen your knife rather than do that because you lose really most of your grip. Majority of human hand strength occurs when the thumb and forefinger lock into place. So that's why when you pinch it, regardless of whether you use our grip or the pinch grip, it's putting the majority of your hand strength right where it needs to be, controlling the blade. Okay? All right. Okay, let me clean up my mess here. I'm going to start to play. Okay. So now that you've got a little bit of feeling of this one, why don't you grab the Santoku style and see how that one feels. That one's not going to rock the same. If you try to get it going in that same motion, it's not going to really do it as fluidly. So it's going to fight you a little bit because the point's there and it kind of catches when you lift it up. So this one you don't necessarily move as much. This one's more of a chopping and dicing. Okay, so this one you just kind of need to lift up and down. When you lift it up, the point kind of catches, so it holds it in place. So again, it's all about fluid, easy, smooth motion. Again, you can hold the blade, try the pinch grip. You can hold the handle, so you can again just kind of get a feel for it. Okay. So what do you guys think? Starting to feel comfortable? Okay. So I'm going to show you a couple of different, so I already showed you the high technique, okay? So again, the high technique is if I'm going to square off this potato so I can slice it, you kind of use the more of the front part of the blade. This is a long enough blade where I could just push straight down as well. But again, we're trying to teach a little bit of technique as well. So the high technique, so if I'm going to cube a potato, that's the high technique, all right? So you kind of cut up with it like that. The low technique, again, is the back of the blade where you're doing the chopping and dicing. So when you want to break it down into smaller pieces, use the back of the blade, and it's real simple. Now there's a push and a pull technique as well. So if I'm cutting something like celery, okay, you kind of let the blade, and I'm pulling through this. I could, again, just chop straight through, but every time you do that, you never get a straight cut. It just kind of goes where it wants to go. So if I'm trying to break down celery so I can dice it up, I'm using the pull technique, so I'm slicing through this as I go, okay? So you kind of slice and pull, kind of like that. And then there's the push technique, which is kind of what you're doing when you're doing the low technique, is you're pushing versus pulling. So there's the high, low, and then there's push and pull, okay? And then this would be a dice when you're just breaking it down into basically into cubes or into smaller pieces. Again, you guys will get to play with all this and practice them. There is the what's it called? Julienne. So if you're going to julienne something, basically a julienne is a matchstick, and that's why you square it off so you can get little matchsticks. And then they have this thing called brunoise or brunoise, something like that. I don't know how to say everything. I know how to do them, I just don't know how to say it. And that basically is turning the matchsticks into little cubes. So if you work at a restaurant, some restaurants will want every single piece of food to be uniform. You're making salsa, everything needs to be the exact same size. So that's part of the technique of, you break it down. I can cut a 1/4 inch slice. I can cut them 1/4 inch this way. And then I can cut them again a 1/4 inch this way, and you end up with perfect little cubes. So if you're making a stew or something like that, you got little perfect little cube potatoes. Okay? And then if you're going to mince something, we'll play with the garlic, and we'll do the garlic here. With garlic, you can kind of take and just crush it with the blade, and when you crush it, it just breaks the skin off. So you just crush it with the back of the blade. And then if you're going to do something like mincing, basically mincing is just taking and continuing to chop with no real rhyme or reason, meaning you don't have to be uniform, but you just keep going until everything eventually is just all chopped up. So mincing is just, I keep going until everything ends up being pretty much uniform, tiny little pieces. With one little clove of garlic, you get one little pile of stuff. But so you just keep going until it's as fine as you'd like it to be, really. So that's what mincing is. Okay. All right. So let's try first. Let's do the potato. So grab a potato and grab whichever of the chef's knives you want to use, big or small, whichever one you feel most comfortable with. And the first thing let's do is let's try the high technique where we square off the potato. So basically, you can do it in one slice or two. Okay? So just cut the ends. And then if you stand it up, you can cut down the sides. We're going to cut it into a cube. You don't have to use the very tip of the blade, although you can, but you kind of want to, you can use the middle of the blade. The key is you're not rubbing it on the surface. So you can use as much of the blade as you'd like to slice through it. There you go. And with the high technique, it's called the high technique, you want to kind of keep the handle high. if that helps you remember.
Mine is not cute.
It's just not square. It's cute. It's just not square. If you'd like, take a second to square it off.
This inch away from me. We can move on.
No, that's part of this is to get good at it. It's not just to get some of us good at it.
The thing is, what we were always taught is you let the knife do the work. So you're pushing. These things are so heavy. If you just put the knife in, you let it ride down. I can do it with one finger like that. Because the knife is so sharp. You just let the knife do the work.
There you go.
So don't push into it. Let the knife. That's it. Just don't push. You gotta slice.
Yeah, just let the blade work. So let the blade kind of move. You don't have to push very hard. Just kind of let the blade go. So when you push, it just kind of.
You're trying to take it and push it down, but you want this as a slice. So you just take your knife and move it forward, and let the knife do the work. It's heavy. Just let it work. I actually, as he said, I don't know if you heard, like 50 years ago I sold this stuff. So I can do all the demos. I don't know how to do this stuff, but
Yep.
I've been using them for 50 years, so it's a long time ago.
Now, if you set it on its side, so it's a little bit lower, okay, and then let's try again the high technique to cut it into however thick you want to do it. So if you want to, let's say you're going to dice it into little potatoes, whatever you want to do, you can make it as thick or as thin as you want. But again, let's kind of cut through into slices like this. Again, kind of let the blade glide.
Start with the top, because it's high, and let it go right, just let it carry right down. It's like slice it, let it go.
There you go. Why don't you, Jamie? Why don't you try the same knife with the shorter version, just to see if that makes it a little bit easier to kind of get used to.
I think I'm still doing the same thing. So that's how I'm used to cutting.
Yeah, you're using the knife in and then you
But
push it down.
when you use these sharp things, you just, and you gotta slice, don't push. If you're starting like this, you have to start with your tip. You just let it ride all the way through. And as you get to the bottom, it comes right off.
Give you a little more practice.
I told my mom I didn't want to do all that. Here we go.
Too bad.
Just think about slicing instead of pushing.
Honestly, her mom didn't teach her this either.
It's high, you go up high, and then slice.
There you go.
That's it, like that. So you're not pushing.
Yeah, while she's doing that,
I
Yeah,
have
that's
that
it.
set.
You
What
got,
do you cut
see, now you're
those
slicing.
with?
the,
I would use this one.
There you go.
okay, that's what I thought.
There you go. It's okay to use more than one slice. It's just a matter of, again, kind of getting familiar with it. Okay? Is the shorter one a little bit easier to maneuver?
They
or-
both feel the same to me.
Okay. Okay, so now you've got them into the blocks. Then let's do the julienne. So let's just make little matchsticks. Now when it comes to your fingers, okay, I am by no means a chef, but the basic technique is you want to use your fingernails, okay? So you put your fingernails on it, and again, the whole point of it is that you don't need to go 100 miles an hour, but your fingernails should hold what it is. I don't even have any fingernails, but it's just enough to kind of hold so it's not moving around. And then your knuckles stay so that it prevents you from hitting the blade. If you have your fingers out here, they're exposed. If you put your fingernails down, your fingers are going to kind of guide what you're doing. So there you go. Good job curling your fingers to the cube. Now, Aaron, what I would recommend, you were kind of using the front part of the blade for this. Try the low technique because it's a lot easier.
I thought we were working on high.
Well, again, it's different kinds of cuts. You can work on both of them, but when it comes to getting to this point, the low cuts are just easier. So that's part of this process. Is okay, what works better for this? What works better for that? And I'm not going to be there to tell you all the time. So just whatever feels the best. So if you move the food toward the back of the blade, if you use the very back couple inches of the blade instead of the front, it just makes it a little bit easier. So again, you want to, when you're doing the low technique, you just leave the nose down, and you can kind of get the choo-choo train going again, or you can just lift straight up and down. But the key is you want to use the back couple inches of the blade. And you can make them as big or as little as you like. You got your finger going?
Oh, yeah.
There you go. It actually works against you when you do that. So you feel how the knife just goes through. Again, it's all about the leverage. You don't have to push very hard like he was saying. It's not about pushing, it's just about letting the blade do the work. Okay. There you go. And if you can remember to, when you're doing your fingers, if you're going to do it like that, just make sure when you get close to them, you let
Yeah,
go.
right.
Or if you can hold it with your fingernails a little bit, again, it's not as advanced as it needs to be because you don't have to go fast. The key is go slow and take your time. Speed comes with experience. So for now, let's get the technique, and then the speed will come as you keep going. There you go, Aaron. It's also, as you noticed, when you were stacking them up, it's harder when you stack them up instead of doing one at a time. So again, that comes with experience, because at home I'll always do it stacked up, but that's, again, I'm used to the knives now.
Right.
Alright, so you're pushing the potato toward the knife, or the knife is coming toward the potato?
Whichever is comfortable for you. So that's a preference thing.
If you're holding them with a claw, you can usually use your thumb to
Push it.
Kind of push it underneath. And what he means by holding it like a claw is if you hold it like this, and you got your thumb under
No, I'm
there,
doing my finger again. Okay.
your thumb, you kind of push it under. Again, if you're using the low technique, the very back of the blade. The closer to the back, the easier it is. Okay, I think we decimated our potatoes pretty well. Let's move on. I'm gonna show you guys the proper way to dice an onion here in a minute too.
Okay, so we throw them away.
Yeah, why don't we clean these off? I hate wasting stuff, but there's really nothing else to do with it, so. There should be trashes all the way around here, so. All right, let's try the celery. Yeah, you want to put your purse behind you over here so that doesn't happen again? All right. Okay, so let's grab the celery, and then whatever knife you were just using, let's try the smaller or the big one. So if you were using the big one, let's try the small one. If you're using the small one, let's try the big one, so you can get the chance to use both of them. And then we'll do the same total of that. So with this, again, you want to kind of do this, the pull technique where I'm kind of cutting into it, and then I'm pulling and slicing through as I go back. So you're kind of doing that same motion, but just a little bit as you go. There you go. And then if you want to do smaller dices, you can do the same thing again. Yeah, don't put your, yeah.
Move them off to the side.
There you go. Remember you want to kind of be fluid, so this is the basic technique. So as you're going through the celery, it's the same. I'm just kind of cutting, and I'm letting the knife do the work. My hand's real relaxed. A sharp knife will do it. And then you can kind of square them up with your knife, and then again the same thing. So let's do a dice. So, no, you hold on to the blade. Again, so you kind of want to go like this. Can you do this? Can you get it kind of, so as you're doing it then, you just kind of, there you go. So the nose stays down, and you just kind of, in this case, you're sliding as you go forward. Instead of sliding as you go back, try sliding as you go forward. So yeah, there you go. That seems easier anyways. It looks like it's easier for you. So this is the basic push technique as you're cutting through, as you're kind of cutting on the way up. Pull the knife back, you get it back over the top, and then you push through. Time out real quick. See if you can kind of get it going like this again. There you go. A little bit easier
Mhm.
because you were kind of moving this hand and moving
I
this
know.
hand. And so
Yes,
that's again just it's not. I know that's why these knives. A lot of people are just scared of the big knives because they're so big. But if you use them the right way, it's all about the leverage.
Right.
And the more leverage, the longer the knife, the more leverage you have. So at some point in time, you'll be able to just kind of go crazy with it and be really comfortable doing so. All right. So got the celery. So that was pretty cool. Good job, everyone. Okay. Let's do some garlic. So grab the Santoku knife. Let's try the big Santoku. And you can take your garlic and basically just hit the middle of the blade. And what that allows you to do is, again, just kind of break the peel off. It just lets it go. And then if you guys have multiple flows if you want to, it's just easier when you have more than one thing. You don't have much yield when you're only doing one, so let's just do two of them, something like this. And then let's just mince this sucker. So basically just keep chopping it until you until you feel like you're done. Because that's what mincing is. It's just keep chopping until you have kind of uniform pieces that are just tiny. Mincing is easier when you put your blade on when you put your hand on the top of the blade. Because basically all you want to do is keep the food underneath it. And just keep chopping. Mincing is really nice if you're doing something for like a sauce. If you don't want big chunks of garlic when you take bites out of stuff. There you go. Looks like you guys got all that out. Now yours is all sticking together because you're not pushing it all the way down to the cutting board. You're kind of, I don't know if you were doing that on purpose, but
No.
you were going quick, but you weren't going all the way through. So just make sure it at least touches the cutting board. You don't have to push very hard. Just make sure it goes all the way through, because that way they won't be all stuck together like you just were. All right, cool. Any questions on that technique? By the way, any questions you guys have, don't hesitate to ask. All right, let's try the julienne. Good catch. Okay, when you're doing a julienne, so let's use this. What you want to do with this is, again, you can use any of the knives, whichever one you like best, they'll all work. What you want to do with this is, again, just kind of, you can use the low technique, and what you're doing is you're just chopping into like matchstick size pieces. Now, if you want to work at a restaurant, what they'll tell you is the julienne needs to be perfectly square. So if there's any curling at all, they want you to flatten it out first, because they should be straight and uniform if you're being completely technical.